and looks at the cash and the checks, and he says, "These are contributions to Campaign for Liberty." And I say, "Yes." And he says, "Oh, you're free to go." And at that point, the original TSA agent had got a whole big to-do, and he said, "Well, I don't know if I'm comfortable letting him through my checkpoint." It was the "my" that really caught me. And then he talked with his supervisor and came in, and said, "Oh, you can go." And I thanked him for his patience.
Two levels of authority that really had to release you. A TSA official, one of the uniformed folks that we all see when we fly at American airports, and then some plainclothes person who gave you the belief that he was an FBI agent, but who never really identified himself.
Correct. I was under the impression, because the police officers had said, "Hey, we'll get FBI and DEA in here, tell us what we want to know." And then he had come in soon after that, and he was kind of ordering them around. I assumed he was federal, or at least at a higher level than they were. But if it was up to the police officers, according to them anyway, they were taking me to the station. Now, what station that was, whether it was the fire station, like you mentioned, I don't know. But according to them, they said, "Hey, you need to be handcuffed. You're coming with us. You are not free to go. Let's go down the hall."
Minutes we're going to have on the show Mike German, who's an ACLU official, who's going to talk to us about this. Is there anything further that has happened or is likely to happen with respect to the TSA? Are you aware of any of these stops like yours happening anywhere else? Is there any legal action that's being contemplated?
A lot of people have come to me and said, "I've gone through the exact same thing as you. Thanks for standing up. I wish I knew what you knew when it happened to me." And a lot of people have asked me, "What are you doing?" And I've got people from the left and the right who have asked me, "Hey, I have a legal experience, or I have experience with these type of things. Let me help you with this type of case." Where we go from here, I'm not certain, but I think it is important that the TSA and the police department of St. Louis are held accountable. It's important they are.
Steve Bierfeldt, it's such a pleasure. Please report back to us as soon as there's a new development in this, because so many of the watchers and listeners to Freedom Watch, as well as people from the Campaign for Liberty and like-minded Americans and folks around the world, are interested in this case. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
It's important to try to stand up for our rights where we can, because the government routinely violates the Constitution and individual liberties all the time. But it's unfortunate. Here we have a small-scale example, right. But in a broader scale, right? I mean, the government violates our rights all the time. We're surrendering all the information to the government when we fill out our tax returns. We tell them exactly what they want to know, even though they have no constitutional authority to demand that we comply. So we surrender our constitutional liberties all the time. Look at what the government is doing with all the bailouts and all the stimulus plans. They are unconstitutionally using public funds for purposes that they have no authority. Yet we let them do it. We let them get away with it.
I want to get into that in a minute. I have some news for you, because I spent about 5 hours last night reading TARP documents, the contracts between the banks and the Treasury Department.
What if you're the first person to actually read them?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because the Congressional Oversight Board, the chair of that board, Professor Elizabeth Warren of Harvard Law School, she hasn't seen the documents. And she's supposed to have those documents in her office. And the Treasury Department won't give her those documents. I only saw them because the Fox Business Network won a lawsuit, as you know, against the Treasury Department, and a federal judge in Manhattan ordered the Treasury Department to give us the documents. So Diane Brandy, general counsel at Fox, and her team downstairs says, "Judge, is there anything you want to see?" Well, of course, they gave me documents that look like about 5 Encyclopedia Britannicas in length, but I zeroed in on these documents. But before we get there, and I think you'll be surprised at what's in there, although you're so smart, maybe you won't be surprised. Well, what is the rule about carrying cash? I mean, is it normal for people to carry large amounts of cash, and for the government to have concern over that?
Well, certainly if you're traveling, a lot of times you take cash. I usually go to an ATM machine. If you're traveling out of the country, you're traveling to, maybe Las Vegas, and you want to have cash around. But certainly travelers are probably more likely to carry cash than people who aren't traveling.
If you, is there anything even remotely suspicious about, you saw Steve, he looks like butter wouldn't melt in his mouth, about him having cash in his carry-on bag?
But why can't we have cash? I mean, it's money.
It's issued by the government.
But we need cash to transact our business. Obviously, the government doesn't want us carrying cash because it wants to keep track of everything that we do. The government wants to track our purchases just in case they want to tax us. I mean, I think right now they're trying to lay the foundation for much higher taxes in the future, confiscatory taxes that they know people are going to want to try to avoid or evade, and they're trying to make it increasingly more difficult for Americans to avoid those taxes. And they want to make sure that they're tracking everything we do. They just assume have everybody pay for everything with a credit card or a check. Right. And you know, here's one of the things that's really crazy. When the government first required that in order to, if you took a cashier's check or a money order of over $10,000, the banks had to report it.
Right.
But if it was under $10,000, then you didn't have to report it. But in the brokerage industry, we clear through Pershing. If you wanted to write a check, a cashier's check or a money order for $8,000 or $7,000 and deposit it into your brokerage account with me, I'm not allowed to accept it. Pershing won't take it. We're not allowed to accept a money order or a cashier's check for less than $10,000, because if you give me a check for less than $10,000, the assumption is you're trying to evade some kind of reporting
law. Well, it gets even worse than that, because, and here's the statute that ensnared Eliot Spitzer, the governor of New York, when he was fooling around with the ladies of the evening in Washington, D.C., and he owed many, many, many tens of thousands of dollars. He paid it in smaller amounts. So the government enacted, this is before Governor Spitzer did this, a crime called structuring.
Well, that's been around for a while.
Right. So if I owe you $50,000, and instead of giving you a check for 50 or 5 checks for 10, I give you 10 checks for 5, the government, excuse me, will prosecute me, not for paying a lawful debt, but for keeping them out of the picture.
Right. I mean, first they passed a law, and if they said, okay, it's $10,000, and then you should be allowed to arrange your affairs to stay outside of that law. But I said, oh, you're trying to avoid it, so now we're going to prosecute you. But in the case of my clearing firm, if you're trying to buy $5,000 worth of stock, and if you want to pay for it with a $5,000 cashier's check, I can't accept it. I mean, It's ridiculous. I have to send it back.
All right, we're going to go to the tape recording of Steve Bierfeldt being interrogated by the TSA and the St. Louis police. We will get back to what I learned in the TARP documents.
I'm interested to know what that
Lew
was.
Rockwell will be here, and you should know about those documents. So let's roll the tape.
What do you do for a living?
Is that relevant, sir?
Yes, it is.
Am I legally required to tell you that?
Well, I'll tell you what. Go kick the plate. You may not be legally required to tell me that, but you will be legally required to help the police officer that comes to talk to you.
Okay.
I'm just trying to ask some questions to figure out what all this is about so I can get you on your plane. But you want to play smart, and I'm not going to play game.
There's no problem. I'm asking if I'm legally required to answer the questions that he is asking.
Yes, you are.
I'm legally required to answer the questions about what my employment is?
He's asking you about your money.
He asked me where I work.
Here's the situation.
Yes, sir.
You're coming through a security checkpoint, okay? You're going through a security checkpoint. Whenever you come through a security checkpoint, they have a right to ask you about anything you have on, anything in your bags, your luggage, any containers that you have, anything about it. Okay. And because you have a large sum of money, he's required to ask you some questions. Okay. All right? And by you being the owner of this box, required to answer those questions. Now, if you have a problem answering those questions, then you need to talk to me, and you'll get a detective and the FBI.
Sure. I appreciate it. What is your name, sir?
I'm Officer Shelton.
I appreciate your help.
Who are you?
That's my name?
Yeah.
My name is Steve Bierfeldt.
Okay. You have ID with you?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
There you go, sir.
Okay. How much money do you have in your bank?
I don't know the exact amount.
Where does this come from? Where does it come from?
It's my money.
Where's it coming from?
It's coming from St.
Where?
Where?
I'm not going to play games with you.
I don't understand the question, sir.
Just 1 second. Just sit your bag down. Hey, do me a favor while I'm in here. Keep your hands out your pockets. Don't use the phone or do anything, all right? Do you have the combination to that box?
It's not locked.
It's open.
It's not locked? Can you open it for me?
I haven't looked under here yet.
Mr. Griffith, where are you headed?
DC, yes, sir.
D.C.?
DC.
I see your boarding pass. Is there any reason you're not answering questions?
I'm not accusing any, sir.
I want you to see from what we're saying. You're coming in with some money, but you don't want to answer any questions about it, you know how much it is, and it's in your possession. I mean,
I'm saying I don't
Is it
know.
a secret why you have money or something?
I don't know the exact amount. You're asking where my employment is. I'm simply asking if I'm legally required.
Well, I'm asking. The question is, why do you have this money? That's the question. That's the major question.
Yes, sir. And I'm asking if I'm legally required to answer that question.
Answer that question.